You guys all know Maureen?
I'm Maureen Wegener.
Hi, I'm Alan Dukiel. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, Geisler. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Brian.
Nice to see you again,
Let's do this right.
Dave. Absolutely. So in an effort not to information overload here, because there was a lot of data that was collected, a lot of information that we have gone through. Dave, Colin, and I had and Adam had a preliminary meeting and such, so Dave is well aware of the enormity of the data and such that we have collected and sifted through and such. But essentially, the agenda that we put together is just a little bit of a brief description. We obviously have been working with the city to conduct field investigations, inventory, condition assessment using the PACER rating system that the city has been using for a while now to rate the asphalt and concrete surfaces, roads, sidewalks, and parking lots. And the ultimate goal here is to come up with a 5-year CIP planning tool, not necessarily cast in stone, but a guide for moving forward, and to position the community, the city, for potentially funding opportunities that may come up. And the documents that you've got in front of you, the map is just a summary, and that goes through and identifies the road related improvements. It's color coded based on the roads, the years, and essentially the table that goes with that map is this one that's got the purple and the brown. And you'll see some numbers that go across the top, the column numbers. So essentially we've got, a street name from, for example, First North, from West Street to Phelps. And actually the basis for this is the framework that Dave has provided from LTAP in order to go through and do his and manage and organize all of his data. So we just utilized and expanded upon that. So the information that Dave collected from his pavement assessments, scale 1 to 10, I guess I wasn't necessarily planning to go into all the detail as far as the PACER stuff, just because we've kind of got limited time here. So kind of wanted to cut right to the chase. So columns 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are years 2022 through 2025. And the color coding on here, there's a little bit of a code on the page 3, the brown, if you will, represents the streets that are going to be included in this year's 2021 construction project. And that has been go back so that
One north.
and the purple are the roads that were included recently in the MDOT Category B grant application. So potentially, we're anticipating maybe getting the funding next year. So the purple streets are those that will be included in 2022. And then the subsequent years, 23 through 26, have actually built on the work that will be done in 2021 and such, because essentially with the street work, you have to do preventative maintenance, crack seal, chip seal. There's things that you can do to extend the life of the roadway and such. So like I said, there's a lot of information here, and let's cut to the chase. If you go to page 3 of the one with the purple and the brown on it, you'll see some numbers in green across the bottom. And essentially, those are the totals for the proposed road work for each of those years. And here again, we've got, you know, the current project, and that actually bids came in real well on that. So that came in quite a bit below the anticipated grant amount. But we fixed the road repair this year. And then that means as part of the preventive maintenance program, we have to come back in a couple of years and do some additional preventive maintenance. So that is how this proposed roadway maintenance plan was built. We touch the roads, and then we, you know, look at a next set of roads, and you can see when you look at the map, it's shows the first year essentially that the roads are touched. And you can see that essentially every single road within the community is going to have some repair work done. 2021 identifies this year's projects, including Woodbury Road and several others. And then 2022 are the roads in purple that we referenced as being included in the Category B grant application. And then 2023, and some of these roads may look familiar as having been, you know, work done here in the last few years. And it's time for some preventative maintenance. And actually, as far as the Category B, the MDOT Category B grant application, the grant program is concerned, that is supposed to be more focused. In fact, they tend to award communities projects if there's more preventive maintenance as opposed to like total reconstruct. They want to make their money go as far as they can too. And the preventive maintenance applications, repairs will allow for that to happen. Reconstruct of a roadway is very expensive, and that was not necessarily what the Category B program was geared toward. So again, the intent of the meeting tonight was not to necessarily go through and, you know, look at each of these roads, but there's sufficient detail here, and we'd like to leave these tables with you. You can go through and look to see, you know, what the roads are, and then the corresponding column with the year indicates the repair work that is being proposed. And if anybody desires some additional information as to the proposed repair methods, Dave sure can kind of help you out with that. Okay. Questions on the roads?
There'll be a lot of work in the next few years.
Yeah. And part of this, when we did our initial meeting with Dave and Paula, we kind of talked about where we want to be, where we wanted to be as far as dollars for each of those years in anticipation of looking at a bonding program. So nothing's cast in stone, and we definitely want eyes to go through this. You're obviously intimate with the community, and if there's things that you have questions about or wonder why we're, you know, doing something this year or whatever, please funnel those questions and comments and such back today.
Can I ask a question? Or?
Absolutely.
So what sticks out is that in 2024, is that a maintenance year? 'Cause it's so much less than these other ones.
Well,
or why is that?
actually, these have maintenance, and when I say reconstruct, we're talking, you know, completely remove all the existing pavement, base, sub-base, the whole bit. And there is not any of that work included in these figures, but there are some projects that are similar to what we're doing as part of this year's project. And that includes essentially coming in and milling, taking off, you know, the pavement that's there, putting down the same thickness of pavement again, but not as, I guess, invasive as doing like a complete and total, nor as expensive. So each of these years is actually a mix of but it just wasn't
just kinda-
time, yeah. I
It looks
know.
like these are very similar, and then this one is like,
It just wasn't time to spend the money necessarily. I mean, we don't want to, spend the money ahead of its time necessarily.
so it's like,
um,
how it's like, it just happened to fall.
Yeah, yeah, and at the same time too, the PACER ratings are reviewed on an annual basis. And when Dave brings that information back, the stuff is all set up such that if there's a significant change in the street, or as we go through, I mean, this is not cast in stone, this is a starting point. And we'll take the information that Dave collects on an annual basis and go through and review what we've got intended for that year. And if it's not ready, or if there's another need somewhere else, we can do some adjusting. Okay. So it's a planning tool, it's a starting point. Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Mhm. Okay, sidewalks. Actually, if I may, a couple of comments, going back to the agenda. I already mentioned that preventive maintenance is what we were going for, and we assumed there were some assumptions that were made. Obviously, the roadways will continue to be utilized and potentially deteriorate. So when we identified the repair, we anticipated, for example, the worst case. It's a 1 to 10 scale, and they've got ranges that are identified that correspond to the different repair methods. And say, for example, there's a 5 to 7, so seven being the worst. So we anticipated a 7 as opposed to a 5, just for planning purposes. And the other thing that we took into consideration, obviously, get the bigger bang for your buck if we can group similar projects together. So that is kind of how we ended up with that lesser number 2 in that third year there. And item G under 4, I just tried to indicate that in 2021, we've got our current project. So that suggests that in 2024, we'll look at potentially crack sealing those same streets. So that's what the 2021 to 24 and then 2022 to 25 suggests. And if you look at the table, you will see that's how that table is put together. Sidewalk. Spreadsheet that we actually have is probably, it just goes on and on, much wider. So again, part of the challenge was to, just provide something that we thought would be the most, I guess, beneficial. And so essentially what we have in this table, this one here with the some bright colors on, and the colors don't really have any significance. Somebody was working in there and put the colors on it. I didn't want to take them out. But essentially what we did was we went out and we looked at every single sidewalk in the city, and we documented, inventory, checked the slope, the width, you name it. We looked at it relative to the sidewalk. So there's a lot of hidden columns, and all that information is in here. You'll see columns 1, 2, and 3 are essentially the same as for the road portion. And then column 4 is there sidewalk present? And column 8, and the way we set this up is we looked at sidewalk on the north, and then obviously we'll have sidewalk, well, street has a north and a south side, or an east and a west side. And so that's why we've got column 4 where it says north or west sidewalk, and then column 8 says south or east sidewalk. So we simply went down through here and indicated whether it had sidewalk or no sidewalk. And then obviously if it had sidewalk, we went through and did the inventory and collected all that information. We did that through the entire community, and look on the last page of this chunk of paper here. essentially, we've got a couple of sets of numbers here. We've got sidewalks, I'm gonna say like in town, and then we also have areas kind of around town, like Woodbury Road and such, where there's a desire to have sidewalks out there too. So essentially, the top green number on the last page, you'll see the 1,015,000. That number there essentially is what it will cost to put sidewalks where there are no sidewalks. And that means, you know, if we've got sidewalk going down both sides of the street, there's gaps, or there's sidewalk going down one side of the street but not down the other, we assume. What we're trying to do is just kind of get an idea as to how much it would cost if, you know, we went through and put sidewalk, you know, where a lot of people would desire for it to be. So that 1 million there in column 5, plus the 1 million over there in, you know, the column 9, because we've got both sides of the street. So essentially, $2 million to put sidewalk where there is no sidewalk. And when I say that, that means like running sidewalk down like both sides of Woodbury, down both sides of all these other streets, but not necessarily the best approach and the most desirable. Not necessary in some cases. So essentially, we extracted out on the middle part of that last page. You can see Doyle Road, Lanesburg Road, Woodhall, Meridian. Probably don't need to have, you know, sidewalks on both sides of the street necessarily. So the total costs associated with the sidewalk for those streets is just under 650,000. Yeah.
So you took
Yeah.
that.
And so we subtracted that out. So essentially, to put sidewalks down the streets in town that don't currently have them or have them gapped out. And the other thing that we did not, you know, I guess subtract out is some of the you know, subdivision areas where the sidewalk is gapped out right now. The developer or the homeowner is going to be responsible for putting that in there, you know, once they develop their lot and such. But we didn't go to that detail here, okay? We're kind of, you know, up there, maybe not quite at the 10,000 foot level, but, you know. So essentially what we are saying is that if we were to construct sidewalks around town, where there are no sidewalks, 371,000 plus 436,000. And then what we also did as kind of a step 2 to the sidewalk process, when we did our inventory and our assessment, we also checked slopes of the sidewalk, the transverse and the cross slope. We checked the ramps, the ADA ramps at the intersections. And so where we found or noted that an item such as that was non-compliant, we included some costs here in order to make it compliant. There's potentially, you know, some older sidewalk out there that, you know, it's condition-wise, it's okay, but it might be non-compliant. So essentially, the approach that we took was kind of the more conservative in order to kind of get the city, you know, essentially compliant. So in column 7, in column 11 there, 367,000 and 256,000 are the costs associated with bringing existing sidewalk, ramps, etc. into compliance. So essentially, and that total for, you know, constructing new sidewalk where there is no sidewalk and bringing the existing sidewalk into compliance, it's $1.4 million, column 12 over there on the far right. And our intent is, as far as providing, this pack of paper here is, it's broken down and maybe there's some, very specific reasons why it doesn't make sense to put sidewalk in an area. For example, Deerwood is a dead-end cul-de-sac. They don't have sidewalks out there right now. I don't know if the city is planning, anticipating a sidewalk in that subdivision. But those are the kinds of things that we'd like to get some feedback, some input on. So that's why we wanted to provide, the detail that we did in the spreadsheets, and also we thought that the best way to try to solicit input was to, give you location information, indicate whether there was sidewalk or no sidewalk. And then column 6 is an indication as to whether it's compliant or not. So there's 2 pieces of information there. Yes, there's sidewalk, no, there's not sidewalk in columns 4 and 8, or columns 6 and 10, where we talk about whether it's compliant or not compliant. And there are quite a few no's, but at the same time, please remember that a lot of the sidewalk criteria have evolved, and this is all MDOT, rules, regs, and such. And some of the sidewalk here that we are talking about has been in place for a very long time.
Any questions?
I see you've got the parking lots too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
As far as the parking lots, I'd like to say a little bit, they're a little bit more subjective.
Okay.
At least with the sidewalks, we were just following that protocol, which essentially we need to, because if there is a funding opportunity that does come along, obviously a lot of that is tied to MDOT, and we need to, if you want their money,
Oh, yeah,
gotta follow their rules.
absolutely.
Okay. Parking lots. Tried to go through here and set this up here too, to convey what we're trying to accomplish here. And if we've not labeled the parking lots such that they're the terminology that is generally used within the community, please let us know and we'll relabel things. I did bring along some pictures here, some photos, in the event we need to kind of look at more specifically where some of these parking lots are located. But essentially with the Clintock Park, we've got the one that comes in off of High Street. We've got the one that comes in off of the Clintock Street, and then we've got the one right near the amphitheaters, just a small couple spaces. Then we've got the one right out here at City Hall, and then we've got the one on the next side of City Hall, which we're calling the DPW parking lot. And then we've got the post office parking lot, the alley, and the hardware. Across the street, it kind of drives down the alley and dumps into the post office. And then we've got the parking lot over between Williams and the alley, south of Grand River. And then we've got a couple of parking lots south side of Grand River, the one behind the bars, and the one that actually runs down the east side of the buildings there. So we went out, we measured the inventory, column 5 is the PACER rating that we applied to the parking lots, and it's a little bit more difficult and, as I indicated, a little bit more subjective, if you will. As opposed to a street, you've got a much bigger surface, and when you start looking at defects in the parking lot, you know, you can rate the parking lot for some of the worst, or you can come to it based upon the average, or, you know, that's why I'm suggesting that it's a bit subjective. Identified adjacent surfaces, you know, whether there's a stormwater drainage system, some of them are sloped so they sheet flow to the side, and some also have, you know, storm sewers, catch basins and such as part of their network, indicated whether there's curb and gutter, number of spaces, including number of ADA spaces. And column 14 gives you just a little bit of a description as to what we saw out there relative to the way the surface looked. And we looked at, if you look at the far right-hand side, we've got an area calculation, and then we've got 3 different repair methods that we put cost to. One called crack sealing, and these are the same types of repairs that are used for the road repairs. So crack sealing, the chip and fog sealing, and then the remove the surface, the HMS surface, and put you down to a depth of 3.5 inches. And going back to column 5, obviously the McClintock Park parking lots are newer. And you know what, I apologize. I think previously that 10 was the worst case. My apologies. 10 is the best case. So the lower numbers indicate that the condition of the parking lot and subsequently the roadways are in a worse condition. And based upon the condition of the parking lot, we took a step, if you will, at kind of prioritizing. And I guess the other thing too, relative to the parking lots, they don't tend to have the funding opportunities such as the roads do. So you can't utilize, for example, category B funds to repair parking lots. So we did not go through necessarily and set up a 5-year CIP for the parking lots like we did for the roads. And that was primarily due to the fact that we wanted to get some additional input and such. So when I say we kind of took a stab at prioritizing, it was strictly kind of based upon condition and also use. Obviously, the post office is a more heavily used parking lot. And so it would be critical, one would think, that it be kept in good shape for those to use it. A couple of other things to kind of keep in mind relative to parking lots. We, in our current project, road repair, we're actually doing a 2-inch overlay on some of those roads. When you have a parking lot that is abutting or adjacent to a building, you're kind of limited as to what you can do for repairs. You can't start, adding more layers on, especially if you've got a door or you've got things that are adjacent to the parking lot. We are suggesting that in order to better define proposed repair is to do some pavement cores. Let's find out exactly how thick the existing pavement is. That'll give us an indication as to the condition, why it's in the condition that it currently is. So in addition to the thickness of the HMA, also what's going on with the ag base, the gravel underneath. If there are some soft spots or some areas that need some attention, we can do what we call a subgrade undercut, go in and take out some bad soils. David Paula had suggested that over in the post office parking lot, there is likely some of those, and actually I noticed in the parking lot over behind the bars, there's some big patches
Mhm.
over there. Were those by chance subgrade undercut areas, Dave, do you know?
They could have been,
Yeah,
there's a
They
good
were
chance of that. I know they
repairs,
just kind of repaired them, but
okay,
they didn't do anything else. There's a good chance there were soft spots in there.
right. Well, when you go in and do a subgrade undercut, essentially you put down some geogrid, some fabric, some stones, and you just, it allows for a much more stable, and it will support the much longer, the HMA than the asphalt that's put down over the top of it. The other thing that comes into play relative to parking lots is also property ownership. I know that from discussions with David Paula, some of the parking spaces, for example, immediately adjacent to the backs of some of these buildings are actually private, whereas like the alley that goes alongside the hardware store, that part is public portion, but in the past there has been some collaboration between the city and the private parties in order to do the job the way it should be done, all at the same time, so. All right, so what we are initially preliminarily suggesting is post office alleyway with take the 3.5 inches, if there are 3.5 inches of pavement there out, and make sure that we've got a good solid base to put a new HMA surface back down on top of. And then because the bar parking lots are obviously, supporting businesses, business related, we thought perhaps those would be a number 2 priority. City Hall parking lot right out here, that potentially could be, the life of that extended by some crack sealing and, something much more minimal than completely taking the surface off and putting a new one on. The one we're a little unsure of is the Williams Alley parking lot. How much use, I guess, as far as the use wise, we thought perhaps that one may be used less than the parking lots behind the bars and stuff. And here again, that's where we need, some input here, so that if that's not the case, if that thing is much more frequently and heavily used, then it may have to be moved up the list. And then obviously the Clinton Park, those are newer, but at the same time, obviously it's important to make sure that preventative maintenance is done so that they do last, much longer. So the numbers as far as, the crack sealing and the surface or the HMA surface removal such for the parking lots, I did not total because, unsure of, priorities. I mean, that was somewhat our first crack at it. So here again, we're looking for some feedback, some input potentially as to prioritization. And we did not assign any years either, because obviously until we kind of start talking about money, where it's coming from, that sort of thing, is kind of hard to, talk about how much, to anticipate each year, especially when, there's the street work that needs to be done, and, there's a lot of things going on here, so.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You've given us a lot to think about. And now it's up to Paula to do her magic and get us more money.
You're saying that the parking lots, there isn't a lot of opportunities.
Well, the opportunities like there are for roadways, maybe category B funding, or even when Shiawassee Street was done, that was the MEDC CDBG money. They do have money through CDBG, depending upon, they've got their rules and rights and stuff too, but I know that we have done parking lots and have gotten CDBG money too, so, but at the same time, that's for public property, not for private property too, so. But, if not opposed to, following up with, some of these folks that work at these funding agencies and saying, well, if you do this, somebody gets in some money, I'd like to give them some credit and say that they just have some common sense sometimes, because it makes sense, for example, like the alley in the post office. The city, just paved the alley and didn't pay any attention to the other parking spaces alongside the alley. And that would make sense to do it that way.
No, not if you have everybody there and you got your crew and everything.
Exactly.
Do it while you can.
Absolutely, absolutely. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
I've got, these are pictures of parking lots, if anybody would. And actually, the arrows on
Thank you.
here are just indicate the direction of the drainage and stuff. Questions as you go through, obviously. First with Dave, you might be able to answer them, or you can give them to us, or Paul. And actually, when we do food parking lots, when we did do our cost estimates, I mean, we did go out there, we did the measurements and stuff, so we do have some pretty accurate numbers and such. Too. A lot of work. Good luck. Right, but you know what? Having a plan like this, it's going to position the city not only to plan for bonding, but you never know when, the state might come up with a new funding program. And, you're a lot further ahead than other communities if you've got something on the shelf, or at least something near ready to go. So, yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Well said.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Good evening, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
Amazing what a satellite can do.
They look a lot nicer than satellite.
Yeah.
Grass looks really great.
Okay, onward. Movies and bands in the park have started. I've heard them, I hear them from my house, so I assume all is well.
Yes, everything seems to be going good.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to know is, am I supposed to be getting the key from you every week, I guess? Or is there any easier way for us to, we really don't need to get in there that trash can now, but if we had some kind of electrical situation, I think that's why if something, a breaker got.
If you guys don't need to get in there, it would just be easier if we set the cans out. And
Okay.
if something goes wrong, just call me.
The only thing that John and I were talking about is if a circuit got blown, it's a matter of, but I just don't know
I
if it's
have-
really gonna happen. But if it is, then you're a long ways away. We would be able to-
I'm not that far and I got guys around
Okay.
town, so.
Okay, all right, sounds good. I'll tell him the same then.
Yeah, I mean, that just makes it easier trying to chase it down. And
Okay, okay.
Okay, John Deere mower is on the way and it's down to the penny. Hey, and the road project started today, so it's a good thing she gave us an update.
Well, they were supposed to start Woodbury Road today. That's what they told us, but we hadn't seen them. We handed out the flyers, but I haven't seen them yet, so they should. I figured probably about midweek when we're trying to ramp up for this breakfast. So
That's when they'll show up. That's about right. Tree and brushwork, that's all going well.
Yep, it's ongoing.
Okay, river project. Councilman Rodebeck will be very happy. It's all looking positive. They give you any cost estimates on anything
They
yet?
did not, but they just sent us an email today that they will be out August 2nd to start. soil
Okay.
work, So
All right. And then just prep for the pancake breakfast, which is this Saturday, I believe.
yes,
All is well with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
it's never wrong. But yeah.
Well, as best as
It
can be.
goes. It goes. We're gonna set up Friday night, I think 7, we set the wheels up and then at 5 AM Saturday morning, so
Oh, yeah.
tables and chairs.
I remember how much fun that used to be. It was a joyous Saturday morning. Well, unless anybody else has anything else they would like to bring up, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Thank you.
Thank you.